Hello and welcome to the DSP Leaders Summit on 5G Evolution. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at Telekom TV, and coming up now is our Challenges and Opportunities Roundtable, where we'll be discussing private 5G network opportunities. As will become very apparent, 5G is not just for wide area network operators. Private networks built around various radio access, core edge and IoT technologies stand to deliver enhanced productivity and business opportunity gains for enterprise users in multiple verticals. But is there a role for the telcos? Well, let's find out what our special guests think, and I'm delighted to introduce Antje Williams, who is SVP 5G Campus Networks at Deutsche Telekom. Arnaud Vamparys, who is SVP Radio Networks and 5G Champion with Orange. Lingli Deng, Technical Manager, Senior Researcher, Artificial Intelligence and Intelligent Operations Center, China Mobile Research Institute. Mark Gilmour, Mobile Connectivity Solutions at Colt Technology Services. And Azhar Sayeed, Global Chief Architect for Red Hat. Hello everyone, good to see you all. Thank you very much for taking part in the roundtable. We asked our viewers what they regarded as the main issues around private 5G networks, and from the feedback we received, we created a series of key questions. So let's begin with the first one. Do private networks need 5G? What does the latest generation of cellular technology bring to the market for private network operators? Arnaud, let me start by asking you that one first.
Thanks. Effectively, we all know that 5G is enabling new applications to support the digital transformation of business, and especially to leverage real-time usage. So companies today want to exploit data when it is produced, which makes them more agile, more in tune with their customer needs, and more responsive in their markets. This is made possible thanks to a magic formula, 5G plus IoT plus edge computing and artificial intelligence. It is all to give access to real-time data thanks to this 5G resilient connectivity. So what do you need for that? In terms of infrastructure elements, you need, of course, small cells to achieve good indoor coverage and resiliency. You need a gateway to exit part of the traffic locally to a custom edge server, firewall to secure this infrastructure, and dedicated or shared core network for one side or multiple sites. And you can do that in a step-by-step approach, starting with 4G, 5G NSA, and 5G SA. So progressively to have the right toolbox to adapt the quality of services of your objects, of your processes to this 5G. So yes, you need 5G for that, but you can start already with 4G. We did that already with private mobile radio, PMR, used for critical communication in industrial site environment, like airport and smart cities as well. And there, 5G will provide a higher availability and security, as well as group video communication and new business applications. So 5G now is key for the digital transformation of activities related to critical industrial processes.
Great introduction. Thank you for that. And you've mentioned various areas there that we're going to come back to in this discussion and focus on in some more depth. Antje, would you like to respond to this one about what 5G brings to private networks?
Yeah, I would take up on what Arnaud just said. We are believing that overall we need a mixture of technologies, and 4G was mentioned. 5G is important for certain type of use cases, and we believe cellular networks have a capacity, let's say, beyond the typical discussion around latency or multi-device connection. It's also the security aspect that the cellular network brings to the table, comparing to a Wi-Fi network, for instance. But overall, we believe it depends on what you want to do at your campus. And for us, campus could be anything. It could be production, it could be airports, it could be refineries, or even hospitals. And it would depend on what you want to do in those locations And that would bring the question around the technology, I would say.
Sure, thank you for that. Any other guests want to add what 5G specifically might bring to private networks?
Guy, I'll take a view on that. Yeah, I think what makes it interesting for a 5G era point of view is actually that the technology allows new players to come into the market, because with the service-based architecture, you can now take the cellular infrastructure and scale it to the right size that you need for your private cellular application. So operators, for example, like Orange, Deutsche, Telekom, as we've just heard, will take one such approach, but it also allows smaller players to come in to build dedicated networks for their particular use case. And we're seeing that in the industrial sector, for example, and in the industrial use case. And I think that's what's different when we move into a 5G era from previous generations, because the whole end-to-end architecture can be sized down and then placed in the right place, because you can take the component parts that you need rather than having to build a WAN network like you mentioned right at the beginning in the introduction.
Thank you for that, Mark. Well, shall we then move on to our next question, because it really comes back to what's already being covered. And Antje, I'd like to come straight back to you for this one, if you don't mind, because you already mentioned about the types of companies that want to run their private 5G network. So this is the question from our audience. They're asking, what are the companies that want to run their private 5G networks? Is this solely for the very largest multinationals in specific vertical sectors?
Probably not. To answer your question straight, I think it would also depend on the country where you're at. So you always have to look what kind of industry in respective country you would find. Let me give an example. In Germany, we have a very, very strong production manufacturing industry, and we have global players like Siemens or Bosch who is pushing for these private networks and have huge communications departments working around that. And when you look at our big automotive companies, they are trying out a lot of things. So in Germany, there comes a push, it was the first ones really moving into private network coming from the manufacturing industry. What is always interesting, I think, is the harbors and ports. That counts for a lot of countries. We have seen that, for instance, in our footprint first time in Greece, in the port of Piraeus, who wanted to have a 5G network there and explore the possibilities of the technology. And what you also can see now, especially with the COVID-19 crisis, you have a lot of hospitals picking up. So before there was very little movement in different healthcare areas, and right now I think because of certain funding, but also because of the obvious need of digitization, I think there's a lot of movement in this area as well. You would see that something you don't see much in Germany, more maybe in the US, is mining and similar deployments, where you usually have rather a coverage point than really these super 5G explicit networks. So I would say it depends, and that makes it so interesting. In Germany, it's definitely the manufacturing industry that pushes the topic.
Great, thank you for that. It's very interesting to see how already we're identifying cases which are purely predicated on the low latency, and other ones that are predicated on high coverage areas, or difficult, should we say, coverage areas. Azhar, you'd like to come in?
Yes, consistent to the answer that you got from DT, energy, manufacturing, oil and gas, education, actually universities building campus environments with private 5G, and also transportation, whether it's the shipping industry or the fleet management capability. What really 5G, it goes back to your previous question, Guy. What 5G really brings to the table is ultra reliable low latency, massive IoT at very high bandwidths, which means now you can address all those capabilities that you weren't capable of doing before with LTE. Now you can do that with private 5G. So those become now the key application points. In fact, there was another panel where I was, where they were saying, well, 5G is more about B2B or to enterprise than it is about to the consumer, because if you were just to deliver a enhanced mobile broadband, that's not sufficient, and that's not really attractive enough to go deploy 5G. So for private 5G, then those are the other two use cases, the ultra reliable and the massive IoT, become really, really important for private 5G type of deployments.
Thank you very much. Any of our other guests have any thoughts about the different types of areas, companies, applications where we're going to see private 5G networks? Arnaud?
Yes, to complement what was already said, we have had already in Orange an open innovation approach. So we interact with more than 1,000 companies and hundreds of startups. So from very small company to multinational companies. And it's true that it's more the multinational companies that have started today real projects with some solution in 5G by design, around typical use case of augmented reality for technicians, for maintenance, to have real-time information when they are doing some maintenance on some machines, and of course some other possibilities like to remotely have control and to remote as well visit of factories. We did that, for example, with Schneider Electric, that is a company in energy and automation that is providing energy and automation digital solutions. And there what we do, it's the usual private network with indoor 5G coverage and 5G NSA capabilities. But as mentioned, you have as well some big economical areas that have started, like Airport Harbor. And I do agree. We, for example, for us in Belgium, we did the port of area of Antwerp with the port of Antwerp themselves for the efficiency and safety of their towing ships, but as well many industrial players having facilities there or activities in this port, like for a chemistry company or some energy company there. So I do think that we will have both. So we will benefit from the public networks where we could cover rapidly a large area like airport, harbor, or more globally economical zone. And at the same time, some private networks for big industrial sites. For example, in France, we already have covered 230 cities and more than 2,000 economical areas. So where companies can already start using 5G and complement with some indoor coverage when needed.
Thank you. And Mark, any thoughts from you?
I agree completely with what's been said about what's driving the private cellular engagements right now. It's definitely coming from those big industrial sectors, airports, exactly. So that's why kind of at Colt, where our focus has been, our network footprint is central business districts and connecting to clouds and data centers. We've been pulling our resources into looking for those use cases that sit outside of those. And so we're seeing interest, particularly in the smart environment, so smart X, so whether that's office, whether that's building, city, those sorts of things. Healthcare, as was mentioned, is a really interesting one, and retail. And so we're testing out right now with several pilots and proof of concepts that we're running right now to try not only prove the technology part, but actually more critically the business case that sits with it. Because I think it's the reason why we've seen it drive from the industry side is, one, because the environment has been created. I think Germany's been a great example of providing regulation and spectrum, for example, to enable private cellular, and also the strong manufacturing footprint and campus sort of environments that allows that to grow, really. And we're looking at that, and then what needs to be in place in able to foster that same sort of success, but on a smaller scale in places like the central business district or in smart enterprise sort of applications as well. And we're seeing interest from that side of things, but it's nowhere near as mature as industry, for example, or manufacturing.
Right. And Lingli, what are you seeing? What types of companies are looking at private 5G networks?
Actually, we have collaborated with more than 2,100 verticals in setting up different pilot projects. And we see that all use cases around like ports and harbors, mining, hospitals, especially, and also education, and all those different use cases. Some of them actually haven't been our partners since private 4G network, and we have built a nationwide virtual dedicated network for IoT devices. And for 5G, actually things are a little bit different in China than in Germany. So in China, we are more looking forward to building a virtually shared but dedicated private 5G network to our vertical customers. And China Mobile is now offering 3 packs of dedicated private 5G network, which would be varying in terms of whether or not the core network, the radio network is shared or not, and whether or not the transport is dedicated or highly separated, or whether or not the core network can be fully or partially shared. So you can see that in China we don't have public dedicated spectrum. So the carriers are actually leveraging technologies like slicing and to build virtual dedicated network for our potential verticals. But it is important, I think, also for the carriers to add value to those different types of potential customers, because we are trying to build a common infrastructure for those private networks. And what we have add value to that part is that we have like decades of experience in network planning, design, construction, maintenance, and those kind of like experience could also be added value to serving a potentially large number of small vertical customers. So that is what we see as our, blue sea and for this market.
Thank you, Lingli. Antje, back to you for another comment on this particular question.
Yes, just to clarify, and my highest respect for the number of campus networks that was already set up by China Mobile in China. I think where China and Europe is quite different is the number of greenfield approaches you probably rather find in China that you really build up from scratch, comparing to brownfield where you have an already existing production environment where you want to change or optimize something. It's absolutely true. So we have in Germany the private network opportunity where basically it's no need for the customers to go with an operator. They would have the choice to do so or not to do so. Also there, what we feel is that managing a cellular network, the experience around that is appreciated, and this is probably biggest asset the operators can bring here. We also see, especially for Deutsche Telekom, who has a very strong B2B unit serving rather smaller customers in Germany, or the so-called hidden champions. So they are German companies. They're probably not globally, but they have quite some campuses either in Germany or also in other countries, where we need to serve them with a virtual network, meaning you use your existing infrastructure and give them by network slicing or other technologies a certain, let's say, secure and own network, but without the need to totally deploy new infrastructure. And for that, I think that is then similar than in China. We are offering this as an operator as well. And as far as I know, the others in Germany, the other operators do also.
Okay, thank you for that one. We're going to have to keep moving on to our next question, because we've got a couple more we'd like to still get through. And Mark, I'd like to come to you for this next question. It's the thorny, difficult question, I'm afraid. Now, given that a company can deploy private 5G without the involvement of a mobile network operator, how should telcos best promote their expertise and remain involved with this opportunity?
Guy, why did you come to me first? I'm the non-MNO on the panel. Because as you're aware, Colt doesn't actually own or operate a mobile network itself, a public mobile network itself. But I think it was kind of mentioned that one of the opportunities I think there is relative to the expertise in that field and being able to manage that, because deploying and operating a mobile network or a cellular network, particularly a RAN, is a specialism. So for the likes of Colt, for example, we work with mobile operators and also with the system integrator community, because it's true, not everyone is going to go to the incumbent MNOs for their cellular solution. I think that's probably what the 5G era starts to enable, because you can start to do these smaller greenfield builds that was just talked about. So I think operators have the advantage of being able to say, we already have coverage in place. You don't necessarily have to go and rebuild that. For some, that will be perfect, because they're not particularly interested in running the network. They want the end goal, the end application. For others, they want that peace of mind of security, of network control and things, and that's what we kind of see in some of the industry use cases right now. So I'd love to hear what the others think on the panel, because it's a real challenge that MNOs are facing now.
Yeah, absolutely right, Mark. And it is a challenge for the MNOs, and it's the great disruption and the changing dynamics that private networks and private 5G networks are bringing to all of us in the telecoms industry. So this is why we love to get the views of all the different players in this particular sector. Now, I know probably all of you want to come in on this question. I think, Arnaud, I think I saw your hand earlier on. So let me come over to you. As an established MNO, what's your view on this? How can an MNO and how should a telco best promote their expertise in this sector?
When I look to Orange and to our B2B unit, Orange Business Services, I think we have quite a unique positioning in terms of set of competencies, because we are adding competency from an operator with capability to build, operate fiber, 4G, 5G networks here in 28 countries in Europe, Africa, Middle East, and as well as an integrator to build solutions adapted to each sector of economy. With this multi-cloud, with cybersecurity expertise. And that's enabled us to give quite a large portfolio. So not just the pure private network approach that could be needed for some side, but that are quite costly to design, build, run. for each site, and we can really have an hybrid approach between the public network and the private network for our customer. Like mentioned by China Mobile, you could have virtual private network on the public one, and Slice is enhancing this capability with 5G. You could imagine private extension from the public network just to have the complementary part for the indoor coverage and the exit of the traffic locally. And that has quite a number of benefits to go through an operator, because you can leverage the public network investment, billions of investment that are coming from mobile broadband, fixed wireless access, and these B2B needs. You can assure the right mobility, the continuity of your service between sites. And of course, as an operator, you really avoid the 5G spectrum fragmentation. We all know that the spectrum is quite rare, and of course you avoid that for two main reasons. First, the quality of 5G is really proportional to the bandwidth of spectrum. So the less fragmented it is, the better it is for the quality nationwide. And second, you don't dedicate to just one usage like B2B private network this spectrum. So you really use it not only on less than 1% of the territory coverage, but you can use it on a national base and on a territory base. So there are quite a number of benefits still. And of course, we have to prove that and to offer the best quality and the best services. It's the way really, I think, that the French model was designed by our government, for example, dedicated the 5G spectrum to operator, but with many obligation to serve the B2B demand.
Right, so let's now get the vendor view on this relationship between the telcos and private 5G network operators. I mean, we know that telcos can get involved from fully managed all the way to just connectivity. Azhar, what do you think is probably one of the best ways that telcos can remain involved in the sector?
Yeah, a couple of things. First, let's understand that the users that are using this private 5G also have the exact same expectations as a consumer 5G, right? The resiliency, the bandwidth capability. So you need to build an infrastructure first that is capable of doing it. Second, these recently there was a spectrum auction, CBRS spectrum auction right here in the US, and a number of utility companies, cable companies, acquired some of that spectrum. Municipal authorities acquired some of that spectrum. And if you notice, what are they trying to do here is augment their capability with this kind of private 5G model. Universities have also gone and acquired some of the spectrum for their private 5G deployment. Now, that doesn't mean all of them are actually going to go deploy their own infrastructure with that particular spectrum that they acquired. What they will do in some cases is, yes, they will build in a few cases, but in many cases, they will either farm that spectrum out back to the provider and say, you build it for me, I'm going to take this, run this particular service, or I'm interested really in the service. So that's one model that we are already seeing. There are several universities here in the US, for example, who have done that, who have acquired some spectrum, then handed it off back to the carrier and said, I want now a private island. Last and most important point, any private 5G user is not using that particular private 5G in the middle of the Amazon or in the middle of the ocean on a ship. They are using it in context to other networks. So if you build your own private 5G network and you're starting to operate that private 5G network, especially assuming you have mobile users, you need now relationships with all of the carriers to be able to roam, to be able to move around, to be able to use it from a remote setup, and so on and so forth. All that makes it complicated, really. So in my personal opinion, telcos have a huge role to play in terms of deployment of private 5G. Whether they deploy it and manage it as an integrated service for the enterprise, or whether they actually build and operate as a slice on top of their infrastructure, or some combination of the two between RAN and core sharing, etc., that was already described by a couple of the operators here on the panel. I think you'll see all of those models. There are public cloud providers now also interested in building and offering private 5G capability with hosting their core in the public cloud and just deploying the RAN and small cell footprint inside the enterprise. So you will see really a big mix and match of this. I don't think enterprise, there'll probably be very handful of few of them who would actually go build their own private 5G infrastructure. Otherwise, telco has a really large role to play in this space.
Great. Well, let's hear from another one of our telcos on the panel. Lingli, what's your views and opinions on this one?
Right. To me, I just came up we are actually, as traditional service providers, are offering another version of private 5G network, is that we are building the infrastructure, a shared infrastructure with physical infrastructure or with the virtual assets of our experience. But if you can see us as providing the cloud service to serving the private 5G market, we are actually providing different versions of cloud service. We could be offering the public version, like we are using slicing to build virtualized private network for you, while the underlying infrastructure actually shared among different verticals if you are not that sensitive to separation and security concerns. And in the same time, we can also offering with you the totally dedicated private network, starting from the infrastructure, but only catering with you our experience of running that network. And all this infrastructure can be deployed in your campus with dedicated RAN, with dedicated core. And another hybrid version is that we could have like dedicated UPF done to your campus and with dedicated radio access, which means that within your campus, the data is kept there and not going to the public networking. But in the same time, you can still enjoying the interworking issues and also the, benefiting from our operational experience. So you don't have to worry about roaming, you don't have to worry about operation. You just enjoying the connectivity and the dedicated and security guarantees that you would like to, leveraging your private network. So it's like different versions of another cloud service that we could provide with you as you are using the private network infrastructure.
Thank you for that. And Antje, let me go across to you. And do you have any views on this question?
I think 5G is for first time also a big opportunity to learn from each other. So I think we are entering a different type of business of what we have done before, right? So when you look at our offerings, we do, of course, offer services to B2B customers. And as Lingli already mentioned, the first step for us to really offer in for the industry was probably IoT networks. And for us, it is essential also to understand what the customer wants to do with the network and what does that mean translated into the network. And for that, I really appreciate that we are working on the topic together. We haven't mentioned yet the device issue on the industry networks, and because it will be totally different devices than consumer devices. So we need to develop something in a use case that works together from the network over the cloud into the services into the devices. And we overall see worldwide, I believe, at the moment, people are trying out 5G. What does 5G really do for them? Can that make a substantial change? How much 5G do they need in their, for instance, in their campus networks, and how should it be set up? And I think we are still, as an entire industry, not only the telcos, we are still learning a lot by doing this. And was also mentioned that a lot of universities at the moment apply for Spectrum because they probably also want to try out things, probably also because I'm pretty sure they don't want to operate networks at the end. And I think this is something where we can see at the end how industries actually work together, and it's a big chance from my point of view. And we as a telco industry also need to really understand our customers in order to provide the right network. Absolutely what my colleagues just said from the other telcos is to operate networks. Of course, that's our DNA, right? So that we can do. We just need to find out what is the right solution for the right use case and how to set it up.
Thank you. And Mark, I'm going to circle back to you because you started this round of answers, and it's very apparent that there's a lot of exciting opportunities for the wider telecoms community here.
Yeah, there really is. And I think that was a really great point there about what the customer wants. And I think we have to learn that lesson in the telco industry, that it isn't going to be a one size fits all. And I think that's the gotcha for us, because we're kind of used to having one network that does that one thing for that application, and trying to then manipulate that to do other things. We really have to listen to the customer to be able to then put in place the right technology, the right application, and have that flexibility, which is probably not what we're greatly known for in our industry. So if we can do that, then it will help to maintain that position, and there will be then room for both a wider play with an MNO based network. Also, then, and we'll have others come in that will probably be SI led, that will bring together the ecosystem to create that can bring that expertise in the various fields, including the end application, which ultimately is what the customer, the enterprise, actually wants. They're not really fussed about whether it's 5G, cellular, Wi-Fi, whatever. They just want the application to work. It's kind of our business to make sure that we match the right technology to that application, that end outcome that the customer wants.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark. And indeed, thank you, everyone, because we are actually out of time. We've only covered a few questions, but we got into a lot of depth and detail in those. In fact, we'll pick up our remaining questions in the after show and more on that later. But thank you all very much for participating today and sharing your views and opinions. Now, if you're watching this on day 2 of our DSP Leaders Summit on 5G evolution, then don't forget to send us any questions you have on this subject, and we'll try and answer them in our live after show program later today. And do take part in our online poll. You can find it below this video player window next to the Q&A app. If you missed any of yesterday's programs, you can watch them all on demand here on the channel. Now, as I mentioned, I'll be back later with my colleague Ray Lemaitre for the after show. Until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.